One of the results of the lies that Trump has been telling where it concerned this pandemic, the lies that were revealed in Woodward's book, Bob Woodward's book, Rage, is this clash over school reopenings. And I want to use Iowa as an example. The Republican governor there, Kim Reynolds, ordered school districts to teach primarily in person or risk losing state funding. Blackmail. This is the kind of leadership this filthy, rotten orange ape has provided. Blackmail. And no matter how much tension has surrounded the opening of schools, the reopening of schools, it doesn't make any difference if it's Iowa or New York or here in Georgia during this pandemic. But as the New York Times reports today, most state and local officials have found a way to arrive at some sort of plan by the first day of classes. Now, even though here in Georgia we have a ridiculously ignorant and stupid governor, Brian Kemp, who, as Secretary of State, stole the election. He did, from the woman running against him, Tracy, oh, come on, Mike. You know who I mean. But Brian Kemp tried to order schools open, and the local school boards more or less told him to piss off, sit down, shut up. We're doing it our way. But not in Des Moines. In Des Moines, this idea of arriving at some sort of compromise plan, it's not happening in Des Moines, Iowa. School began this week. And local officials there, school officials, openly telling Iowa's governor to piss off, and a judge who ordered that the school districts obey the Republican judge's orders. And the school boards and school teachers there have said, no, thank you. So the decision by these school leaders puts the Des Moines district's funding and administrators who run those districts, that district in particular, at risk. And it leaves students, of course, locked out of athletics. Oh, they'll survive. And their parents uncertain whether online classes will even count. Well, that's because of the fault, or it's the fault of the lack of leadership. Any Republican governor in this country who accepts Trump as a legitimate leader and who follows what this orange ape, the lies that he's been putting out there, is not concerned with the health or safety of the students, the school workers, or the teachers. And whether or not online classes will even count should have been determined. We are in the 5th month of this. It should have been made very clear here in Georgia, my God, in Georgia, in Malloy School District, every single class counts. And in her district, this is not true in all the districts in Georgia, not by a damn sight. But in Molly's district, my daughter's district, it is remote learning, period, exclamation point. And the governor of Georgia can piss off if he doesn't like it. Well, he stopped his threats because I guess he realized that being a weak little Trump sycophant as he is, that he might not want to risk the wrath of the parents in the state or in the county that I live in, the school district I live in, which happens to be the second most populous in the state of Georgia. But this conflict that Trump has set up is a clear example of the tension between state officials, the governors, the legislators, who have followed the lead of Trump's lies in pushing schools to reopen classrooms, and local administrators. This is where the clash is, often in Democratic-leaning cities or districts like I live in. And those school administrators fear that in-person instruction is going to do the obvious, put teachers, students, and school workers' health in danger and cost their lives. What did I hear yesterday on the news? 6 or 7 school teachers, since this reopening bullshit has been forced on them, have died because they were teaching their students. And Trump is touting on his little goddamn Twitter feed, schools must open in all caps. You murderous bastard, you. This is just insane. The Des Moines school superintendent, Thomas Ahart, said, according to the New York Times, quote, "It kind of feels like science versus politics. The last thing I want to do is make this political. What I desperately want to do is be able to honestly tell my staff and my students and their families that I'm doing everything in my power to keep them safe." End quote. And the governor, the Republican Trump-sucking governor, Kim Reynolds, she argued yesterday that by pushing schools to open classrooms, she was prioritizing the needs of the most vulnerable students. She said at a news conference, this Republican Trump sucker, quote, "We just simply cannot afford to let our students be left behind, even in these most challenging times," end quote. Well, then, Miss Reynolds, you Republican Trump-supporting moron, why have you not provided in your state for school districts to take care of your most vulnerable students? Surely you can think of a way to do it other than putting their lives at risk by insisting they come back into a situation that will almost guarantee that they'll get sick. But no, these are Republicans. Now, all of this in Iowa, and I'm using Iowa as an example because the New York Times used it as an example today, and I'm quoting from their article, but this dispute is playing out as Iowa remains one of the hard-hit states by this pandemic. Over the past week, Iowa has had the nation's 3rd highest number of new coronavirus cases per capita. But that means nothing to the Republican governor of Iowa. She doesn't give a damn. She's going to do what the boss of all bosses says. Dr. Ashish Jha, the dean of Brown University School of Public Health, who worked in the Obama administration, who has advocated opening schools in places like the Northeast that have reduced the infection rate to the point where it's almost manageable. He said, quote, "I certainly would not feel comfortable sending my kids to school at that level," meaning Iowa. So the idea of opening the schools, of course, I wish Malloy School District would open tomorrow, except for the fact that if they did, I wouldn't let her go for a very simple reason. I live in Georgia. And the infection rate here, thanks to the bullshit from our governor, who is another Trump sucker, is still above what it should be. What public health officials say, you have to get your infection rate below this number before it would be reasonable to assume that if your child or you practices social distancing, wear a mask, wash your hands, then it might be permissible to go into a classroom. But that's not being done. So in Iowa, The governor there, the Republican governor there, issued a proclamation on July 17th requiring schools to offer primarily in-person instruction. At the same time, new daily classes in Des Moines were rising. That school district decided it was no longer safe to offer any in-person instruction, and administrators applied to the state for a waiver so that they could offer only virtual classes, online classes. But that request was denied because the county's test positivity rate was below the state's threshold. The state, not science threshold, but the state of Illinois' or Iowa's threshold. We don't put a high priority on educating our kids. Isn't that a damn shame? We don't put a high priority on educating our young adults. If we did, there would be no charge to go to university. None. But the hedge fund operators and the Wall Street speculators, they've got to have their money, so screw the schools, right? So, most of Des Moines school buildings are aging. The average age of these schools is about 65 years. They have poor ventilation, crowded classrooms, which makes this school district totally not unique. Oh my God, I can take you on a tour of Atlanta public schools. And as you look at them from the street, you don't have to even go inside. You can tell that these schools should be demolished and new high-tech buildings built in place of them. But that takes money. And Betsy DeVos's Department of Education, no. No public education. You have to have Christian education. That's what she tried to do in Michigan. That's what she's trying to do across the country. So the kids desperately need new school buildings, high-tech, great ventilation systems, all of the digital equipment necessary to give them a good education in these times. It's not going to happen. When I went through the public school system in Toledo, Ohio, educating children was a priority. It was priority numero uno. And there's a good reason for it. You know what the reason was? The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. We had to be educated. But now, there's no emphasis, there's no prioritizing education of our kids. We tell all of our students, well, you need to go to college. You need to get a college degree. Oh, by the way, when you graduate, unless you have a full scholarship, you'll probably be $150,000 in debt. And the debt collection will be run by predatory government agencies that would charge you interest, and they will track your ass even after you are dead. They will come into the goddamn cemetery, dig up your corpse, and see if you were buried with rings or jewelry that they can take to pay off your debt. That's where we live. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. You have your choice. You can listen to the ranting with the audio podcast, or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.